Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Things SOPPA, our weekly conversation about SOPPA on Tuesday afternoons at 2 o'clock. Notice that today is our next session, but then following that, the next session will be actually April 13th. Because of the holiday, I'm taking off Friday and Monday, and just feel like that would be a quick turnaround to share any new information with you come April 6th. So our next meeting will be April 13th. The Zoom link would probably work if you wanted to wait in the waiting room for an hour. You could do that. I will put in the chat here the link to the slide deck, and also the Slido link is there, so you can join the with the code Z972, because we'll use Slido as we go along. As always, my name is Chris Worley. I'm the Director of Technology Services for the Learning Technology Center. This slideshow is available to all of you. It is has archives for all the slides from previous presentations. I've tried to weed out things that may be inaccurate at this point based on old information. So hopefully the archives of the slides at the end of the presentation are accurate. If you do find something that probably would cause confusion or anything like that, please reach out to me and let me know that. Also on this link, on this first page, is the YouTube link to the playlist for the recordings for all these sessions, so those are available for you as well. And also the Zoom link for these sessions should be consistent for each week leading up until it's set to end on May 25th at this point, but we can go as long as people continue to need this as a resource. So first thing, just trying to gauge the audience a little bit here and just get a little bit of information for you to get into Slido and to access the system, because we're going to use this for questions and answers as we go along. So you'll have the ability on the Slido website to be able to ask questions, and we'll go through those as we wrap up today. So it looks like a good majority of people lost count, but definitely not the first, so that's good. We do have quite a few first-time members. My math, 20% with 25 filling it out. I should have had kind of a cheat sheet set up. So that's good to know that people are attending on a regular basis, and but for those first-time people, you definitely will get something out of today. And again, you can look at the resources as we go to catch up on things. So thanks for sharing that, and continue to use Slido. Go to slido.com even if you didn't fill out the poll, because you can ask questions there as well. So usually the first question is, what is SOPPA? And so for those first-time attendees, this is just a reference to the resources that we have on the LTC website that are available to you to have conversations with your other district staff people, whether you're the technology person or the curriculum person or an administrator in your building. All these resources will help explain what SOPPA is and what the background behind SOPPA. And then ultimately, what we do today will help with the conversation of how you go about doing things and actually implementing and managing agreements with the database tool set that we have. Just to summarize, ultimately, any application that you're using in your district that has student data in it you need to have a data privacy agreement with that vendor to show how that data is being used, what data is being used, and what will happen to that data once you're no longer using that application. That's kind of a 10-second view of that, but the resources there that are on this page, the legislative brief on SOPPA is just a good one-page document. The video that's referenced here is also a good video for just introducing somebody to it. One piece of SOPPA, as well as the recommend or reasonable security. So that's something that we need to check out. And then ultimately the link to the Illinois Student Privacy Alliance is a way for you to learn more about how to implement this stuff. So just weekly, we try to just show you some, and I should get better at that word, but I try to say it fast, I guess, statistics. The latest originating agreements, and I'm working on a system to help me with that as well, just to make sure I am giving you the latest agreements. And then some tips and suggestions, some resources, and then try to answer questions based on your experiences and your comments and those types of things. And then if there's how-to information to be shared, we can do that as well. And so just like this is our weekly agenda, all this is available on the YouTube channel for you to go back and look at and review. And all those YouTube videos have a description in them that timestamps are available. So if you want to skip around and look at the how-to stuff, you can do that. If you want to look at the other stuff, you can do that as well. So these are the statistics, kind of broke it out a little bit so you can see the pretty graphs there. Just looking at the number of districts that are continuing to participate, I did add in a bunch of special ed co-ops and EFE vocational type stuff into the list of districts. So those are available now for people to choose to request a district account. You'll see that, and I actually noticed just in a few minutes ago that from noon today or 11 o'clock when I created this slide, the 989, I think we're over 1,000 now for signed DPAs, just so you can see the growth of the number of agreements that are there and that people are using the system. And I think that's one of the main things that we try to get out of this presentation, is just knowing that you're not alone in this process, and that the collaboration and the effective use of the database is going to help everybody in the process. So the latest originating agreements, again, this is just there for you to take a snapshot and look at that slideshow and see what new things are available within the originating agreements. And if you don't understand originating agreements, I'll try to explain that a little bit when we talk about the Illinois NDPA. So moving on to tips and suggestions, the Illinois NDPA document has been revised. It's been a couple weeks now that we released the version 1.0A. And again, thanks to the Illinois Council of School Attorneys for helping with that. But that document, the idea, and it's all linked here, and you can download this copy. There are some tweaks to the PDF that I'm working on that I'll make available in the near future as well, for some things that have been pointed out to me that need to be like signature boxes and stuff like that need to be fillable. With the Illinois NDPA, the idea of the Illinois NDPA is that it is a legal agreement that has been reviewed. A big portion of it is a national agreement that was put together by the Student Data Privacy Consortium. That is a nationwide consortium, actually international consortium. And they took their experiences with vendors and with lawyers and school districts and alliances, and put together a national data privacy agreement so that it would be consistent across the United States and available to vendors and to school districts. And then within that, there's an Exhibit G that is for state-specific agreements or state-specific laws. And so Illinois, we've done this through the Illinois Council of School Attorneys. Originally, it was done by Robin Swartz, and now this IASB group through the Illinois Council of School Attorneys has revised this agreement so that it's more inclusive of legal firms around the state and in-house counsel from school districts around the state, so that it's a very usable document that can be used from vendor to vendor and from school district to school district. So once you have this agreement vetted, the idea is that you can go to a vendor and have this agreement signed, and then ultimately there's an Exhibit E within this document that allows the vendor to say other school districts can sign on to this agreement, which if they've already vetted this agreement, then they can subscribe to it with little hesitation in that process. And we have tools to help with that process. So that's a quick explanation, and I don't have them scheduled yet, but I will have sessions in April on the Illinois NDPA, as well as a session on using the database more as a one-time shop instead of little pieces here and there. Just some tips and suggestions, and a couple of these things have come up recently. This was something that I shared several weeks ago, but just knowing that this is a database that's shared across the United States, space is going to be an issue. Just uploading documents to a website, space is an issue. So if you can, or what the symptoms of if it's too big is that when you try to upload a document, it'll just come back to the same screen, and SDPC is working on providing error messages that would actually tell you that. But right now it just comes back to the same input screen and says all the same stuff, and nothing happens. So if that is the case, then we need to compress that file and try to reduce the size of that document. So that's available within Acrobat, as well as you can do it through an online process as well. And then another thing that comes up from time to time is just naming conventions, and really the bottom piece of that is the most important thing, where it says recommended that there are no spaces or punctuation in the name beyond the dashes and the underscores that you use. So things like hashtags and parentheses and different things may cause an issue with, or slashes may cause issues with the file name. So try to use just alphanumeric numbers and underscores and dashes if at all possible. And then just, I just actually came from a meeting and I feel a little bit underprepared for this presentation because I was running late from this meeting. But at the national level, they're looking at these enhancements that people are suggesting, and there's been a few from Illinois, and I appreciate you putting those in there. As far as how to make this registry better, whether it's from a public standpoint or whether it's from our district level standpoint as well. And then I've put some stuff in there to help manage it from a alliance level, as far as like knowing what the most recent originating agreements are, so I don't have to kind of create my own way of doing that. But so just things like that, that you're working through your workflow and trying to do things and not understanding things or not having a clear view of things. you can email those to me, or also I would suggest putting them as feature enhancements inside that Google form. That would be helpful to make it a better solution for everybody. These are just kind of placeholders inside the slideshow, just so that you have access to this information. The Illinois State Board of Education adopted the Illinois Association of School Board press policies and procedures in relationship to SOPPA. So those are available to you as a press subscriber. You should have access to all that information. And then if you are not a press subscriber, you can utilize this email link to request that. But if you are a press subscriber, just use the portal to access that information. You don't have to email them, and they would appreciate you using the portal for that. Another placeholder is for the SOPPA for Teachers webinar that we did at the beginning of March. And I should make reference to, I know IDEAS put in IETL organizations are putting together some SOPPA for Teachers webinars as well, that come up at the end of April, I believe, or in April. But this slide deck here has a couple slides that'll be important to your teachers and just help. The majority of the slideshow is background information for SOPPA, but there's a couple slides in there that directly affect teachers, and the recording is there as well. So this is the resources page. I'll take you to that resources page and just show you the information. And again, this is really where I would suggest that you kind of start your workflow within SOPPA rather than starting it on the ISPA website. Like, come here first and then see if there's any new resources. Also noticing that the resources are here for the flow charts that are available to you for download to help have conversations around the management of agreements within your district. So utilizing these documents as resources for you to use in having those conversations, and just is a benefit to you. And if you see things or have comments on those workflows, please share those with me as well. All the ISPA YouTube playlist is here. And then the slide deck is here as well. And then something new that we've released over the last couple of weeks and made reference to the last couple of weeks is the tutorial videos that Sean Mullins from Olympia School District has helped us make. And they're really well done and should be beneficial to you. And if you have have feedback on those as well, please share that, and just check out the new videos from time to time. If you're subscribed to the LTC Illinois web or YouTube channel, it should let you know when those new videos have been uploaded. Also, another thing within the database is the weekly updates, or within the resources is the weekly updates, and those are available down here at the bottom. And so you can see from previous weeks what's available to you and what information we talked about in the conversations, and be able to see the videos and the other resources that are available to you. So that's just a way to see a snapshot of this presentation as well. And then one thing I'll show you, just spend a little bit extra time on the resources here today. So the All Things SOPPA presentations from previous weeks are available, and they start out very much the same every week. I just want, well, that's not doing what I wanted to do. All right, YouTube playlist. I think my hands are, all right. So if I go to this, I want to pause. And then if you look at the description of the video, you'll be able to see that it will take you to specific spots within the video and show you those particular parts of the presentation rather than listening to the whole presentation at a later date. So those are available to you on the resources page or on the ISPA page. That's our resources page. Upcoming events, again, I mentioned the IDEA IETL presentations for teachers that are coming up in April. I'll put those on the slideshow and make those available to you as well. But then another thing that we do at the LTC is actually have some presentations or have some conversations around other topics as well besides SOPPA. So if your job allows you to do other things besides SOPPA, then we can have those conversations around makerspaces as technology people, virtualization, social media, certifications, and Wireshark. It's really meant to just be a way to come together, share your experiences, share your knowledge, what you're doing with those types of things, as opposed to a time to really dig deep into anything and learn anything. It's really meant to be conversational and sharing experiences and problems that you may have around those certain areas. So check those out as well. And then also your technology or your teachers and administrators will find value in the events that we offer or the other sessions that we offer in at the LTC. So at this time, I am going to transition to questions and answers. So if you do have any questions and answers, or if you do have answers, you can share those too. But if you do have questions, use those inside of Slido, and that'll be the easiest way to do that. One more thing, and I saw there was a link or a question in the chat. If you go to the data privacy page, and scroll down to the SOPPA section. So this is the what is SOPPA slide. This is the link to the Robin Schwartz webinar from a couple weeks ago. So that's available to you if you don't have that, if you didn't have that available to you, that is available to you on that page. All right, so let's ask some questions, answer some questions. Do we have any idea if the state or at least larger districts have been attempting to put pressure on companies like Adobe or Autodesk to sign agreements? I don't know if they're putting any pressure on anybody, but I know people have reached out to them at one point or another. I do believe that, again, this is kind of that bigger question of what do we do about Google, what do we do about Microsoft? Microsoft is aware of SOPPA. I had a conversation with them, or I was in a conversation with Microsoft people on Friday, and they were mentioning that type of thing, that they're aware of it, and they sent some information to me. The biggest thing is going to be what those agreements look like and what the method of signing on to those agreements is going to be. That's going to be the biggest thing that we have to figure out. Ultimately, my take on things, and it may be just my outlook on this process, is that I believe that we will have agreements with that. It's just with those companies, it's just going to be a matter of how and what it looks like as far as signed agreements. So definitely stay on top of that conversation, but it's one of those things that the companies are aware of it, specifically the Microsoft and Google, and we will continue to have those conversations, whether it's in this type of environment or other areas that we're looking at trying to implement these agreements as well. Do you know about this teacher-focused idea web series for teachers? That was what I was referring to. I don't know if there will be recordings or anything. That's something that IDEA and IETL are putting together, so you would have to conversate with them. but that information should be available on the IDEA or the IETL websites for that information. Is the NDPA final, or are more changes expected? I can't say that it'll ever be final, but at this point, the NDPA portion of it, there is no expectation that anything will be changed in the near future. And the Exhibit G was just revised through the work of the Illinois Council of School Attorneys, and so I don't see having expectations of that being changed either. But there will be some, like, there's a couple things that I need to do from a fillable PDF type of thing to make the functionality of the device better, or the PDF better. But I think overall the actual content of the agreement will not change in the near future. So did I circle around that answer well enough, Ben? What would be a good resource to learn the duties, purpose of the digital privacy officer to ensure compliance? Seems very general. I don't really think that there's anything specific other than that person is probably going to be the person that's going to be signing the agreements, and that's really what's meant by the digital privacy officer. You can look at the press policies; they may have more specific information about what the privacy officer may or may not be doing, but ultimately, I think school districts are really using that as the person or persons that are going to be signing the agreements. And that's definitely something we can have more conversations around if you have more specific questions about that, or if somebody has some experience with what your district is doing with that, feel free to reach out to me and share that with me as well. Could you do an example of taking an existing agreement and copying it to work with your organization? Yep, I can do that. We'll do that in the how-to session. And then any update on why the auto exhibit E generator sometimes errors out? A couple of things that I'm learning and I'm trying to figure out the easiest ways to fix it is, in a couple cases there is a situation where there is no exhibit E document actually uploaded with the full agreement. So that's something that I'm working out. And then also in cases where there's two originating agreements, basically the system doesn't know what to do with those two agreements, so it doesn't know how to handle that. So those are the two main things that I've figured out. Huddle, Canvas, and Desmos are three examples that I'm aware of that aren't working. If you have other examples of agreements that seem to be erring out, or if you have specific errors, please email those screenshots to me and I can take a look at those. I'm assuming that some of these chat is just you guys conversating and having good conversation there. If you do have questions, feel free to put those in the Slido, and we will look at those again after I show looking at agreements. So we're kind of going fast here today, so that's good. So again, going to the Illinois Student Privacy Alliance webpage, going to log into a website, to the ISPA website, logging in with your district account. Be aware that depending on how you requested the account, you should have put a username in there. So if you put your email address, your username will be your email address, or if you put in just a username, then your username will be just your username. So the place I would start is view all state DPAs. And that's a way to see all the different agreements. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see, yep, we're over 1,015 different entries within this database. So this is very full database already and is only going to get exponentially bigger as we go. So one way to find an agreement to see, like if you have that list of inventory of what you're using in your district, and one of those items is Crisis Go, so I can search for Crisis Go, and you'll notice that there's a lot of agreements here for that as well. And then if I click on Originator, and this could be part of the Exhibit E thing not working or working, and this is something that I'm going to continue, and I know I keep saying this from week to week, is something that the Alliance needs to help with this process to understand why there's different originating agreements and limit it to ones that will work and be functional as we go. But for finding an agreement, the place to start is to look at the full agreement. So this Illinois NDPA with exhibit would be the full agreement of that was entered into between Olympia School District and Crisis Go. So if I click on that and look at this agreement, I'll see that the first page says that it's Olympia and Crisis Go, and then I scroll down through here and just as you look at the agreement, these are some things that you can see. This Exhibit G should always be checked because Exhibit G is the Illinois portion of it. The Exhibit E is going to be that portion that, or that agreement is going to be that exhibit that will allow you to sign on to, or that the vendor is going to say that other school districts can sign on to this agreement. The signature pages for that particular agreement. And then the next sections are the main portion of the NDPA. And then Exhibit E is a description of the services. Exhibit B is the data that's being used. Exhibit C is the definitions. Exhibit D ultimately does not have to be signed or filled out ahead of time. This is really meant to be a placeholder for future reference and use. And then Exhibit E is going to be that agreement or that exhibit that is available, that this is going to be emailed to this email address at Crisis Go, so that when you as a subscribing district would fill out this bottom portion, or if you use the Exhibit E creator, it will fill out this bottom portion, and that agreement will be emailed to that particular vendor with this Exhibit E attached, and will be available. You'll have an agreement with that particular vendor. So this is for the vendor to fill out the security things, and then the Exhibit G is the Illinois portion. And then Exhibit H is if there are any changes that are necessary for either the vendor or the school district. When it comes to the Exhibit H, obviously everything up to the Exhibit H is the standard agreement. When you get to the Exhibit H, that's where you need to have, that's where there may be changes that you need to have vetted by your attorney. And over time, your attorney may be able to say, okay, if there's an Exhibit H that includes this certain thing, then you can check off on that, and it's okay to use that in this agreement and sign on to that agreement. So once you've kind of vetted the agreement to make sure that it's acceptable to you, the idea would be that you can download this Exhibit E, which should be signed at the top by the vendor and blank at the bottom. So in the one way of doing an Exhibit E is to download this document and sign this document, and then you would add this as an agreement back into your database. So that's multiple steps and processes to workflow to make that all work. The second way of doing it, and this may be one of those examples of something that's not working, but if I go to the Auto Exhibit E creator and I search for Crisis Go, I should be able to see that, okay, there's two agreements here. One of them is with Olympia. That's the one I just looked at. If I click on Create Exhibit E, what it's going to do, and I can do this portion of it, I'm not going to submit it, but this would be the information that you would fill out if you were adding this as an agreement, as a subscribing LEA. So you would fill in this information based on your school district. So this would be publicly added. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and do this because this will be a good way of testing this to make sure that this works. Anything else that I want to add to that, I can. And then I can click on I agree and create Exhibit E. Fingers are crossed. Thank you, Sean. And as a district, then I can go and look at my agreements. And one of those agreements should be Crisis Go. So if I look at this top agreement, top section, that should be the full. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you might be able to see that it, in the status bar, that it's a link to Crisis Go _ Olympia CUSD 50 or 16. And so that's the full agreement that I'm subscribing to as my school district. And then at the bottom is the Exhibit E that I just signed. And it would sign it based on my user information. And the date, today's date will be in there, the school district that I'm a part of, and so on. So this just emailed that document to Jacob L at Crisis Go, and they're going to wonder what that is. But it might also be a lead for them to contact me to see if I want to actually use their service, even though I don't. So just be aware of that. So that information is there. Ultimately, if I want to, since this is not, so this is like another how-to for managing your agreements. Obviously, I don't have all these agreements in here. So if I want to delete this one, I can, and come in and say, yes, I want to delete that. So I'm going to go back to, so that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, and I'm going to search for Crisis Go again. And if I use Olympia School District, this prepare Exhibit E, there's been some confusion on this. Ultimately, the idea of the Exhibit E is, or prepare Exhibit E button is for if you want somebody else to be the signer of that agreement. So you can go to account management and manage your district users and add other people into your system that would be just that person that's going to sign the Exhibit E. So I'm going to prepare the Exhibit E for somebody else to sign. So I would go in, and ultimately it's going to do everything but create the PDF with my information at the bottom. And what's going to happen then is, so it's the same information here. It says save prepared Exhibit E. So then somebody else within my district would go to the other menu choice that says view prepared Exhibit Es. And so there's a role, there's an actual role that you can specifically give that person the ability to do. And so I would see those as that person. Or if you have full district admin rights, you can do this as well. But all I would do is that person that's signing Exhibit Es is sign that, and then the PDF would be created and emailed with that person's account information at the bottom of that document. So hopefully that helps a little bit. with this, with the idea of the process and what to do for agreements. If there is not an agreement, then you would want to utilize on the resource page. We do have some sample communications. So this is just a Google Doc that's got some email information in here that you can send to a vendor and attach the Illinois NDPA version 1A as the agreement, and it has some explanation of what that document is and why you're approaching them and what the purpose of the agreement is as well. So again, all these resources, please provide feedback with information or with ideas that you have to make those resources better. If there's certain things that you need help with, feel free to reach those things out. So definitely just keep asking questions. Your question maybe need to be asked by everybody in the state, but nobody's asking the question. So feel free to ask questions, provide feedback, and just, if nothing else, overwhelm us with your requests, and we'll figure out how to make that happen or whatever we need to do. How come the Exhibit D does not have to be initially completed? Ultimately, it's really based on when you're no longer going to be using their service. So ultimately, you could have that document filled out, but it's really about when you're going to end the agreement, and it's just there to be a resource for you to have available. That's my understanding of it. I don't think there's any issue with filling it out, other than if circumstances change or something like that at the time that you're wanting to end the agreement, that you would have to do a different one. So just be aware of that. And if you use the create Exhibit E, is there a record of the email being sent? Are we required to keep proof of that somewhere? That's a good question. I mean, ultimately, the agreement, the PDF is going to be on your website, but is it sent? Do you have record of that? And I don't know that you do. That might be something that could be an enhancement or a request to have, if nothing else, to send that email to yourself as well as the vendor, as just a double check for that. So I'll add that as a request, and that might be a way to satisfy that. I don't know. That's a good question. I might keep that one up there. Can we link directly to SDPC on our district website with the DPA information for our district? Absolutely. So if you are in your system, so I talked about adding users. So manage district users is here, so you can add your district users there. And when you add a user, this is where you can set it up for the Exhibit E signer only. So that's possible that you can do that. If they have these top two rights, I believe they can also sign Exhibit E. So, but they also have the ability to access a lot more information and things. But that Exhibit E role pretty much just limits them to that. And then to go back to the question, is under, oh, sorry, it's not even under account management. It's under tools, and it's the customized resource listing. So when you look at this customized resource listing, there's a place to customize your information that's going to appear on your website, and then you would also need to, this is the link to the website that you would have, that you could embed into your website, or you can just have the link on your website along with other information that's available. This is where you would customize that information, would show up here. The public facing can sort all these different things and have access to that. The data elements will show up here as well, and then your agreement and the exhibit will show up on here as well. Yeah, somebody's asking about the 7345 policy for IASB press policy, and I don't have access to that at this point either. But I'll see if I can get access to that. And it's kind of a weird situation with the copyright and the property of whose it is and who has access to that information and all those things. So so I will answer these questions, but I also want to just thank everybody for being here. If there are other questions or things that you want to see today, you can definitely stick around. I'll continue to answer questions as long as there's questions. I appreciate the support of everybody in this process, and what you bring to the group, and the questions you're asking are helping everybody else, and the information that you're providing by going through and using this system is helping everybody else, because we're again, I think it's important to also say that this is not a requirement to use the system. You can do anything you want to do to have agreements and to display these on your website and those types of things. But I think working together through this process and having the ability to use this database that's been utilized by other states for several years in this process, we're kind of trying to mold it for us, and so we're figuring out some things. So definitely continue to provide feedback and ways that we can help you. So that's the one I'm holding on to. How specific does the Exhibit A have to be? Does an exact service name need to be specified, especially when considering signing on to Exhibit E? I think that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the application does and what the name of the company is, and some of those things. It may come down to, like, if it's a umbrella company like the one I always kind of refer to as Renaissance Learning, if they have multiple products within there that you're using a specific product that's not listed in an Exhibit A, then that might be a reason for having a separate agreement, that you wouldn't sign on to the Exhibit E. I know there's talk about functionality that Utah's requested that would involve being able to upload a separate Exhibit A for specific things and an Exhibit B that would be specific to that data. So at this point, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. If there are questions about certain things, you can definitely reach out to me, and I can either answer that or find the answer for you as well. And it's also, as Sean's saying there, it's also helping cover that information about posting the purpose of the reason that you're using the service and what it does. So So as long as there's already a contract between an Illinois school and the vendor, we don't have to do anything but the Exhibit E, correct? Ultimately, that is the case. Ultimately, you need to look at that originating agreement between the Illinois school and the vendor to make sure that what you're subscribing to with the Exhibit E is good for you. If 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 they've changed anything in the Exhibit H and you sign on to that, you're signing on to the Exhibit H as well. So just be aware of that. And just another thing to clarify, um, the database also includes agreements across the United States. So you can utilize that information as a basis to help with that initial agreement, but you can't sign on to like a Missouri agreement because you have to have the Exhibit G, which is the Illinois agreement. Um, but you can use that agreement that Missouri may have as a basis to say, you've already signed on to this agreement in Missouri. Here's the Illinois portion of, or here's the Illinois version of that agreement. Will you sign this agreement? So section 30, I'm gonna check off the, so as long, yes. And again, I know I'm just rapid fire answering these questions and answers. So if you need clarification or feel like I didn't answer your question, feel free to reach out to me. Section 30, item 3, somebody's a lawyer in here, says SOPPA doesn't apply to general audience websites and web services. Was anyone able to clarify what that means? Ultimately, I believe that means that it, my interpretation of that is anything that's not going to be have student information and it is not necessarily going to be something that you have to have an agreement with. If it has student data, you're probably going to go down that path of you're probably going to have to go down that path of getting an agreement with that vendor or with that application. But if it's just a general site that you go to, like a Google search or a that you're not logged in, or the whitehouse.gov site, then you shouldn't have to have an agreement with them.
Hey, Chris, can I clarify that real quick?
Yep.
This is Adam
Yep.
from Pontiac. So it says on there, we kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago with some other teachers, but I never heard if anything ever came of it. It says general audience mobile applications or mobile websites, even if login credentials created for an operator's site, service, or application may be used to access those general sites. So like it says, even if you create a login, that still doesn't apply. So it almost sounds like, single sign-on, like Google single sign-on applications wouldn't apply.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would say that that's probably going to be the case, as long as there's not student information that's created or artifacts and stuff like that that are tied to the student. And that, I mean, again, that's going to be something that lawyers are going to figure out specifically. But I don't think that just because they sign on doesn't mean that. But why are they signing on? Like, what's
right? Okay.
Yeah, that would be my concern with all this, is just ultimately, if they're signing on, what are they doing and why do they need to sign on? Is there going to be information that's going to be tracked and available and all those types of things?
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yep. That's a good question. I believe it does, but I'll double check. Does the signing the Exhibit E fill in the so if you do the Exhibit E creator, it doesn't ask you for the data elements. I believe if they were filled in by the originator, I think it fills those in based on you, and then ultimately you have the capabilities of going back and adding those under edit other information, or actually in the manage agreements area, you can change those. But that's something I'll verify that as well.
I can verify that, and it's the best part of the auto exhibit by
Okay.
far.
Okay. So if the originating agreement person filled it out,
them in. Yep.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Sean. All right. Those are really the questions that we wanted to answer. Again, as far as next steps and moving forward, as far as learning more about this information, number one thing is ask questions. You can ask those questions to me and I'll find the answers, or find the people that can find those answers. Check out the webinars. There are some past webinars that we've done back in October, November, talking about the Illinois NDPA. And then also check out All Things SOPPA. This link actually takes you to the registry, or to the ISPA website, and that's got all the resources. And then if you want to sign up for additional, even if you're here, you probably have the link to all the Zoom links for future things. But if you want to register, you can, to get an additional reminder. So thanks again. I will stick around if people still have questions. Feel free to unmute and ask questions. Or if you have questions, you can also type them in the chat or put them back into Slido. But thank you. Oh yeah, I gotta stop recording so that people unmute.